Well, welcome everybody, and thanks for joining us. Good evening to all those who are tuning in from Europe and Africa. Good afternoon in North America and South America, and good morning to those of you tuning in from Asia. I'm Capece Schulberg, the Collier County Waterkeeper, and your host for these daily Waterkeeper COP26 briefings, along with my colleagues, Dr. John Capece and Chris Wilke from the Waterkeeper Alliance. So we're at the end of week one of the conference, and the dichotomy of what is going on inside as opposed to what is going on outside could not have been more stark today. We decided on a divide and conquer strategy today, with John attending the conference while Chris and I and Michael were out in the streets with the kids. Headlines out of the conference today were John Kerry's statement that he is now working with the Chinese and the Russians. You will note that neither of those leaders attended the opening night when heads of state came to make their address to the assembly. That did not augur well. China is the largest emitter of greenhouse gases. The US is second, and Russia is in the top 5. So talks with those nations and with India are critical. So John, you were in the Armadillo and the Blue Zone today. In fact, you're still here. You're still there, pushing a 12-hour day. What are your top line thoughts about the conference today?
Well, today's theme was youth and public empowerment. So I attended the various sessions at the almost 100 pavilions here. I attended maybe six of the pavilion sessions today. And the thing that struck me the most dramatically were the greatly diminished crowds. Clearly, a large number of the people who would normally be in here engaged in the pavilion activities were out there joined with the young folks in these protest activities. So the students that were here in the pavilions and participating in their various events were more from the technical advocacy side of the spectrum. And I think that I tried to focus on the water issues, student engagement. There were only a couple of sessions on that, but I'll talk a little bit about that later, and then about some of the more general student engagement discussions and talks that took place here today.
John, great, John. John, you said yesterday that these conferences are often attended by professional meeting takers who, for various reasons, whether lassitude or political or financial pressure, quietly prefer the status quo. And the kids would say that all that is like being trapped in a matrix, that those solutions, the solutions coming from behind closed doors will not work. A whole new paradigm is necessary to upend the status quo, which has been deaf and blind to the mounting climate crisis. There's considerable mistrust. We spoke to some kids today, considerable mistrust of the politicians whom they consider a lost cause, compromised by the powers of capitalism and inertia. So I haven't seen the numbers published. I don't know exactly how many kids were in the street today, but I've organized a lot of marches and rallies, and my estimate would be around 20,000. So the march was organized by the Scotland chapter of Fridays for Future, and that's the movement initiated by Greta Thunberg. It included striking school pupils as well as unions for street cleaners. So let's look at Glasgow from the student activist point of view. Michael, we can run that tape. This was before the rally started.
So we were right at the head of the march. Behind me is a bunch of orange flags that you see is the Scottish Union of Bus Drivers and Street Cleaners, and they're in solidarity with the march. Directly behind them is a forward phalanx of police who will be clearing the streets, and behind them is the head of the march, and it should be heading off in just a couple of minutes. So we'll try to report to you from the march as it moves as well. So that's what we're seeing, a lot of commotion. I would say there's at least 10,000 people here, there may be 20,000 people so far. Thank you. So folks, as you see, we're in the middle of this throng. which is just getting going. It is 11 o'clock in the morning. The march is due to start at 11:30. I would say there are, hard to know because we can't really see beyond this crowd, I would say there are maybe 10,000 people here at the moment. So we're with Anushka, who's from Belgium, and she came in with a coalition from Belgium. So Anushka, what brought you here today?
Well, we're here with a group of people to demand system change, because without system change, there won't be any justice for climate change. We need to get moving and get people aware of the current problems in society in order to make a difference. So we wanted to gather here to let people hear our voice and make a difference.
Yeah, so it's fantastic. So when you say system change, tell me what you'd like to see specifically.
Well, now capitalism is basically part of the reason why the climate is suffering so badly. So we suggest like a feminist socialist approach in order so everybody gets a chance in society, because now the poor and the people who are less fortunate are suffering more instead of the rich people who are basically polluting the planet. So it's unfair.
We've been seeing that all week, and we've been talking about that a lot, about climate injustice and how to level the playing field, and how there's a burden of responsibility on the developed countries to help those who are less advantaged than we.
Exactly, and the people who are actually making sure that climate change is happening are the ones who are suffering least from the actual consequences, which doesn't make sense. So there definitely needs to be something that needs to happen right now, because otherwise it's going to be too late.
May I ask you an indelicate question, Anushka? How old are you?
I'm 21.
21, okay. And most of your group is here from Belgium, and they're students?
Yeah, we actually are with a group of people from all ages. We are with youngsters, students, working class people. Basically, we all unite because we all have the same goal, which is a better future for all of us. So the least we can do is be here today. So.
Okay, that's great, Anushka. Thank you so much for talking with us. We appreciate it,
welcome.
and all best with your efforts this week. We need your support.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're with another protester here today. You can hear there's a lot of commotion around as people gather and talk and demonstrate and voice their opinions. So we're here with Santiago, who also came from Belgium today. Or when did you arrive, Santiago?
We arrived yesterday evening.
Yesterday. And you came with this group?
Yeah.
And,
all in a bus.
Why do you think it's important to be here today?
Well, I'm not going to pretend I have hope that this will actually motivate politicians to do anything. We're here kind of because we have to. Like, because there's no... I don't know, I wouldn't be able to just sit in my room and do nothing and watch this all unfold. Like, at least here I feel like I'm spending my time doing something useful, even if I don't expect any effects from it.
How long will you be here in town?
We'll be here until Sunday.
Until Sunday.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Santiago. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your presence, and every little bit helps.
Yeah, we're here to try.
Okay, thank you.
What do we want? What do we want it? What do we want? What do we want it? What do we want?
So, hi folks. As you can see, this is the very head of the march, and it's just noon on Friday, so it started about a half hour late. This is the other side of COP. You know, a lot of meetings are taking place with delegates inside the conference hall, but this is the students, activists from all over the world gathering. I don't know how many are behind me. It's hard to say because I didn't see, this morning when we gathered, there were already 10,000 people. So it's hard to know how many people are behind us, but there's a lot of energy, a lot of passion. We spoke to a couple of young activists a little earlier on, and this is just as important as what's going on in the conference hall. Thank you.
There we are. And we finished up with who our very own Chris Wilke marching along. How was that for you, Chris? How did you feel being not only kind of an observer, but a participant today?
Well, it was a great day, Casey. This was my first day outside the COP since I got here. And I will confess to being a little disillusioned being inside the COP. I'm sure there's great ideas being exchanged, but there's a lot of listen to me, listen to me, listen to me going on there. And there's a lot of greenwashing. And you really are seeing the corporate government partnerships in the pavilions. They say the name of the country on the top, but you can really see the influence of big business in a lot of the pavilions. Some good things definitely going on, but I left after the last 3 days just thinking this is not a change moment that I'm seeing here at this COP. This is like a trade show. And then out in the streets today, the people that don't have the power are the ones that are really leading this discussion. That COP would not be full of people today if it wasn't for people doing what these folks are doing out on the street 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago, right? So this is really what drives the change. The very first Earth Day, which for a long time, and maybe still, was the largest protest in America's history. And it led to the creation of the EPA and the Endangered Species Act and the Clean Water Act and a number of other things. So 20 million people took to the streets on one day. And that's a form of what we saw here today. And I was really energized by being part of it. I got up this morning, my legs were tired, I've been on my feet all week, working, 10, 12, 14-hour days. And it's like, didn't know if I could march today, but I tell you what, I forgot about it really quickly, being around so many people and seeing all the messages. You did a great montage there. There's people, everyone has their particular issue, which is impacted or is caused by climate change. And the solutions often that we are seeing proposed are ones that make sure to protect the folks that got us here. It's like when we're asked to look to big corporations and big business for guiding us out, and we certainly need their partnership. So I'm not saying that they shouldn't be part of it, but we do need to connect with how people are feeling in the streets, and people are angry. They're disillusioned. They know these conversations have been going on for a long time. And as the IPCC report confirmed this year, there's no part of the world that is not currently suffering impacts of climate change. It is impacting everywhere. And people are well aware of this. And there's a great consistency being all the way around the world here, and seeing things similar to what I see at home in Seattle. Not quite as many flash bombs and smoke as we see in protests back in my neck of the woods, but it was very peaceful today. But there really is a commitment to a just transition and to centering disadvantaged communities. At the very head of the march was a line of Indigenous people from all over the world, and then another throng of people all around them, protecting them. When we got to the rally at the end, there was people representing impacted communities from all over the world, Colombia, Brazil, a number of places. So this is what the climate movement has become, and that's a very good thing. And we need to be considering that as we debate the policies and find out who is going to really take part and have input on solutions when we finally do get to moving those. And the other thing that was really nice was just to run into people here halfway around the world. I ran into some folks, and on a whim, I thought they might be from Bangladesh. And so I asked them, and their faces lit up, and they talked about how they are environmentalists, and I said, well, I was about to say you must know our waterkeeper Sharif Jamil, but before I could say that, he was already talking about Sharif Jamil. So we posed for pictures and sent it sent it back to Sharif, and so there was some great moments like that. I met someone from my hometown, so it was really. It's really an important moment, I think, COP26. People are kind of saying enough is enough. We really need to move forward, even if it means some sacrifices for some people. And it will be very interesting to see how this all shakes out. Is this going to be a watershed moment for the climate movement, or is this going to be one step along the line to COP27 and 28 and 29 and 36? So that, of course, remains to be seen. Sure felt like there was energy in the blue zone on day 1, 2, and 3, and then, but I'm just, I'm somewhat hopeful, but I think there needs to be more communication between the street and what's going on inside, and that's one of the reasons why I'm really happy to work for an organization like Waterkeeper Alliance, because I think we can do that. We can move between those two worlds, and in some ways, that's kind of our job, is to be right there with the community, the disadvantaged populations, the people in the street, but also carry that into the room where negotiations and policy decisions are taking place, and try and bring as many of those folks with us, because they are leading, and we just need the leaders to listen.
I mean, it is the complacency versus the urgency paradigm. You know, that's really what we're looking at. And those kids today were expressing a whole lot more urgency than I heard in the rooms, you know, the last 3 days. So maybe that'll create a jolt, give them a jolt. And none of those kids had passes. I mean, I didn't see a single person with a badge. Well, they probably wouldn't wear it anyway. They'd probably be ashamed to be wearing a badge in that kind of march. But I echo that, and I also felt it was a beautiful atmosphere. The cops were, you know, very polite and very, you know, just trying to protect the protesters. Good harmony between police and the protesters. John, do you have something you want to talk about with the protests that we saw? We promise we will get to, because we really want to hear what you saw inside the conference hall today. But anything you want to talk about the protests, that what you saw, or what your take is on that question of the kind of dichotomy that we saw today?
Well, first I'd like to comment on the 2 students that you interviewed. The first one was from Belgium. And in 2019, the Belgian students had a huge rally in their country, even though the COP, the UN conference, was in Madrid. And I recall looking at the various photographs of this rally, and they had a lot of creative banners, a lot of good thoughts. And the one that struck me from the students most dramatically was the one that said, "Study hard, protest harder." And I think that's a good philosophy for students of today. They need to have a knowledge base on which to achieve change once it becomes politically and economically possible. But for it to become politically and economically possible, they are going to have to protest. They are going to have to be heard. Their priorities are going to have to move up the priority list to the top of all of these governments and the business sector as well. The second student who you interviewed was from Santiago. And that's interesting because that's where the 2019.
He was actually from Spain, John. His name is Santiago, but he's from Spain.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But to go back to this, to the Chile conference, the fact that it was in Madrid was simply because of the political unrest in Chile. And this speaks to the issue that if we don't act quickly on these issues, we're going to lose the opportunity due to destabilization, political destabilization throughout the world as the stresses from climate change bring down or stress or transform our governments into possibly those that are less responsive to public priorities. And also as the direct impacts of climate change begin to strike, more and more of the resources and investments will go to simply survival and sustaining the population and repairing damage that occurs on a year-by-year basis. So the protests are very important to enable these students to be able to use the training that they're receiving at these universities to make the important changes in society.
Yeah, I was struck by that too. And first of all, I have to give a kudo to Michael for shooting that footage today. That was not CNN, or that was our footage. And Michael Fiddler was shooting that in the middle of the crowd. And, it was kind of rock and roll, but he got some beautiful footage. So really appreciate that. I was at the head of the parade, and then I stepped aside and I let it flow by. And the last 2 days, I've been interviewing 2 waterkeepers who are trying to make sure that their rivers remain undammed. One is Meg Ale, whom we'll have on the show tomorrow night from Nepal, who's trying to keep the Karnali River undammed. And the other is Bruno Monteferri from Peru this morning, who's protecting the Marañón River. And as I watched this whole flow go by, I saw it as a river, and I got very emotional. It was really moving to me to see all of this energy, all these people coming out, all this youthful energy, and their commitment, and they're such a mass of people. It really, as I watched it go by, and I watched it go by for 10 or 15 minutes, and it wasn't even a tiny percentage of the parade, but it really moved me to see this in the streets, and my sympathies are there. They're with these people. And I think what Chris is saying about the Waterkeeper Alliance kind of being able to straddle that, being in the activist camp and being able to talk with leaders and delegates as well. It's a really interesting a really interesting perspective that we can have. I agree with that. So any more thoughts on? So go ahead, Chris.
Oh yeah, I was going to say I felt the same thing. It really felt like a river of people, because it was definitely kind of constrained by the streets are not super wide, and we were actually texting our locations to other people, and I started referring to it as I'm downstream of you, I'm upstream of you. So, and then we had our 3 banners for Undam the UN and ONU Sin Represas, which is the Spanish version, and we had another one too that showed the Ojai Dam in California with the giant scissors painted on it, and they kind of looked like a dam going across the river. And I thought at one point it kind of occurred to me, oh, we could just stop and back everyone up, and we could say, no, well, now you know how the fish feel. But that wasn't what it was about. But it also struck me that we were the only ones there for free-flowing rivers. There was a lot of about nature, there's a lot about communities, there's a lot about health, solidarity, environmental justice, but I didn't see any other dam fighters there. And so I was glad to have that opportunity to share it. And we did interact with people. We had a QR code that people could scan to sign the petition. You can also go to undam.org and sign the petition there if you haven't already. That is basically telling the world leaders not to use counterfeit carbon credits to build more dams. We don't want to see Article 6 of the Paris Accords used to incentivize hydropower construction. So I'm glad that we're going to have Meg and Bruno on, and I look forward to hopefully participating in those as well.
Great. That's great, Chris. So, John, what do you? How did your day go? You were like you're still in the conference. You seem to be posed at the Moroccan pavilion, if I gather your backdrop correctly. So, tell us about what your thoughts are and what your takeaways from the day are, John.
Well, I tried to bounce around from pavilion to pavilion, depending upon who was having a session involving either youth or water, or preferably youth and water. And my last stop was here at the Morocco Pavilion, and got engaged in an extended conversation with some faculty and students here. And I thought, well, I'm here, I'll stay and have the conversation in this location. But I started at the Water Pavilion, and there they had the sort of, I would describe them as traditional water and youth sessions, where they had several activist students who were engaged in community water projects and priorities. And they talked about their activities in various nonprofit organizations and school projects addressing various traditional water conservation and other community projects. One of the sessions was called Youth and Water Governance, and then another was called Youth Action on the Water Climate Nexus. And you'll hear increasingly more and more about the water climate nexus. Then something those of us in the profession have recognized from the beginning of this in the 1980s. But it takes things decades to sort of seep into public consciousness and become a theme of more general relevance. And I think that's what we're seeing here today. And at this COP is the emergence of the water climate nexus. I think waterkeepers clearly have a role to play in that. And there's a unique opportunity, I think, for waterkeepers to kind of set the agenda when it comes to youth and water, because certain academic disciplines are represented here at COP already through the student research, the graduate students, and the advocacy. The social sciences are disproportionately represented because they tend to be the more vocal of the students, and they participate in these various sort of community-oriented discussions. But on the technical side, there needs to be more of the water and the environmental science students here, but with an environmental advocacy and climate advocacy perspective that I think could reflect waterkeepers' perspectives much more. And I think if we, within our various waterkeeper jurisdictions, help to cultivate these students and encourage their participation in the UN climate conferences, we could help them bring this agenda into more of the pavilions or the sessions of it. The second pavilion I visited was the China Corporate Pavilion, not the China Pavilion, but rather the China Corporate Pavilion. And they had a presentation, a panel of 4 individuals talking about the Global Alliance of Universities on Climate. And these were traditional discussions of capacity and where the universities could cooperate on this set of issues. And when it went to the question and answer session, again, it was a small group. No one really stood up. So I decided to ask a question. And I asked them about the metrics. I asked them about the ecological economic foundation of the problem that we're facing in our world today, and suggested that they could be the vanguard of transforming universities from conventional economics, therefore conventional approaches to taking on the climate challenges, into more of an ecological economics perspective, more broad approach to valuation of goods and services. And it happened that one of the panelists there was actually a Yale University economist. And he very delicately responded to the question by saying, yes, the economics profession has some responsibility for the current state of affairs, and therefore a large responsibility for transforming the public mindset. I didn't really hear much in the way of a commitment to achieve that transformation, but clearly an awareness. And Yale is one of the more progressive universities in the United States. They've had a number of high quality publications coming out on the climate issue for more than a decade. And I've been fortunate to read through many of those over the years. The next pavilion I visited was the Congo Basin, and they had a session discussing mangrove forests and mangroves' role in capturing and sequestering carbon. And they had a couple of students in attendance who participated in some of the research that went into this presentation. So it was very interesting talking to them, hearing some of the numbers about various nature-based solutions to the climate crisis. I think that's where waterkeepers are largely coming from. We like to stress nature-based solutions. Then I went again to the Central Asia Pavilion, where the Tajik government was having a session to discuss some of their water challenges, but more from a traditional perspective of flood control, water supply, electric power generation. And one of their serious difficulties in addressing even these traditional development priorities is the lack of highly skilled personnel needed to approach these issues in a modern technical fashion. And I asked a question along those lines, and they admitted that the Western nations are largely stripping these developing nations of their talent, particularly in areas that would normally be public service jobs. And whereas in a country like Tajikistan, a university graduate might earn a salary of perhaps $100 a month, $200 a month, at the top end maybe $500 a month. It's very easy for Western nations to tempt these talented young people into coming over and populating our corporate environment or our government agencies. So these developing nations have a difficult time addressing their traditional public service needs, much less climate evolving set of priorities. So we had some interesting discussions on that. And then afterward, I went over to the Russia Pavilion, where they had what seemed to be the largest group of technical students that I've seen here at the pavilion. And that was from the nuclear industry. And what struck me about their very enthusiastic and heartfelt concern about climate change and possible role of nuclear energy in addressing it was this theme that you mentioned about the corporate influence. Instead of sort of describing themselves as advocating or informing the public on the science and technology of nuclear energy, they instead adopted a language that was more about advocating for the industry. So through their exposure to traditional influences, this seeps into their mindset. And I think it's important that we help students, not only of the nuclear industry, but of all disciplines, that they are advocates for their discipline, for the scientific knowledge that they develop as students. They are not advocates for any particular industry that may be based upon that knowledge. And that's an important distinction. So again, the theme that I heard throughout all of these sessions was a critical brain drain, or even in the West, a lack of sufficient numbers of talented technical graduates to take on all these various very serious, complex challenges we face in tackling climate.
That's very disheartening. And you mentioned that a little earlier, that there seems to be the lack of acumen on the scientific front from young people and young students, or a lack of aptitude or lack of interest in this sector. And we need these students to be stepping up and filling these roles. We need the students. So that, I think that could be symptomatic of their disenchantment with the process. They just don't feel as though they're being listened to, and they don't feel that they're going to have a role, and they're kind of like just checking out, which is a terrible shame. And I don't know how you reverse that. I don't know how you incentivize students to get involved. I mean, John, you're so involved in the student movement. I mean, and you've worked with so many students over the course of your career. Maybe you have an idea about that. I don't know. It sounds terribly, it chagrins me to hear that the students are not interested in these professions. We need them.
I believe they are interested. They're just not incentivized to pursue them. Coming out of universities can have huge debt accumulations. And when you face that kind of debt, you have to look for a job that delivers a high salary. And those are in the traditional economy. Those are not in these high risk, low reward public sector positions or in nonprofit organizations. So transforming economic incentives, I think the students will respond. So eliminating school debt, which is a particular problem in the United States, can go a long way to freeing up students to pursue careers in industries that they may feel are more relevant to their perspectives on the future. And similarly, as not only debt issues, but often people get jobs that offer certain benefits. In the United States, one of the most critical benefits is health benefits because it's such a large cost factor. When those are tied to traditional industries, people will take those traditional jobs. Whereas if it's people are allowed to migrate from one job to another with confidence that their healthcare costs are still covered through a percentage of whatever income they realize, then they are able to perhaps do careers that.
How about an environmental Peace Corps? How about that idea?
Well, the civilian, citizen, I forget what they called it, the CCC back in the Great Depression days, Civilian Conservation Corps, that's what it was. They're working on developing one of those. And unfortunately, that may have been one of the casualties of some of the recent political developments in the United States. But clearly, we do need to offer young people opportunities to engage in meaningful contributions on the climate front and to make use of their of the technical knowledge that they spent years developing and mastering.
So, I mean, one of the things we've been talking about all week is how we need to listen to Indigenous people, students, and to listen to their voices and try to, observe what they're doing and try to honor what they're doing and try to help them get their messaging out. So I think we can do that a little bit this week. We can keep pushing that out. Tomorrow is the main event. I mean, today was only the preamble. Today was the small march. Tomorrow's supposed to be the big one. I mean, it may get hampered a little bit because it's supposed to rain all day, so that may tamp down the numbers. But tomorrow's the big event, so we'll have to see whether we go out and cover that again. Chris, are you back at it tomorrow with the banner?
I will for sure be at the rally. I'm trying to look at the COP schedule and see if there's something that I don't want to miss that's in the COP. Yeah, we have a total of 4 banners with our group. We are calling ourselves the River for Climate Coalition, and we've got International Rivers is here, Water Climate Trust, Rios to Rivers, and a German group called Gegenströmen. I think I got somewhere in the ballpark with that. It means countercurrent. Anyway, and also have coordinated with Planet Amazon. This is a French group that helps Indigenous people in the Amazon. And so that's the basis of our coalition. And but we're trying to have a big presence here and make ourselves known. And we'll be next week, I think, delivering our declaration to the parties of the UN and looking to get some notice there. So
that's part of the People's Climate Summit. That's part of that next week.
Yes,
right?
our event is going to be at the People's Climate Summit. Which is a separate event from the COP. It is held at various locations around town on Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday, the 7th, 8th, and 9th. Ours is first thing in the morning on Monday. Well, most people back in the US are still sleeping. So that's our event, but we haven't picked our day. It may be the next day. We plan to deliver our declaration to the parties of the UN, and the declaration was signed by over 350 organizations in 69 countries. So we want them to know that we're watching this, and there are a lot of people who don't think that hydroelectric dams should be incentivized as a solution to climate change. It's going to waste one of our last chance to really make a difference.
Yeah, I mean, we're connecting all those dots, and part of what you said about the other day about the insurance industry divesting from certain projects, that ties back into it, putting pressure on financial institutions. And why we heard today that from the Carnally Waterkeeper that the financial institutions have backed away from this ban for the moment. They're not planning to finance the dam on the Carnally. So a momentary victory. We'll see if it holds. You know, they'll probably come at us again.
You're teasing tomorrow's show.
yeah, exactly. And anything going on with the Ensure Our Future from the event? Any upshot or new developments on that?
No, I haven't heard anything. We are going to be continuing to pressure these companies that are investing in fossil fuels. In one case, there's a well-known insurance company, Liberty Mutual, that actually owns outright a coal mine in Australia. So, so that they're not just insuring them; they're actually completely investing in them. And so we're going to keep the pressure and the visibility up on these institutions, so that it is well known, who is underwriting the climate crisis. So we'll continue to work with them.
I have my kit. I'm reading through it. It's pretty it's pretty detailed. It's an impressive document.
Yeah, a lot of research went into that.
Yeah. So John, you got anything you want to add to the discussion before we kind of go on our separate ways tonight?
Well, given that this was the Youth Empowerment Day, and my attendance at the sessions revealed this critical need for both students trained in these technical areas and students trained in these technical areas with an environmental sensitivity. I think that waterkeepers around the world have an opportunity to work with their young people, with their students directly, and help shape their careers and their mindsets and their participation, encourage their participation in these. And maybe there's some structural things we can do to help achieve that over the next year, to bring more of those types of students into the waterkeeper activities in their local jurisdictions, and then help them attend conferences like this, both in person and virtually, and bring similar activities back to their universities and communities.
Yeah, that would be a great initiative. The kids I spoke to a few others that we didn't play tonight. They were really interested to hear what we were doing with the Waterkeeper Alliance, and what they were kind of curious. So I think there may be openness to that, and they said, because we were kind of suspicious, as an elderly guy coming up and talking to them in the middle of March. But as soon as they heard what I was doing, what we were doing, they were really interested. So let's keep plowing forward with that and see if we can see if we can draw some more young people into the Waterkeeper movement. That would be fabulous. So yeah, just to resume, a lot of great energy out there in the street today. I kind of felt more at home than in the conference, and hopefully they will get the message. This kind of pressure is really, really important, and it was on all the news networks, and tomorrow will be again. And it does have a kind of rollback effect on what's going on in the room. So great to be with them today and to participate in that and just to hear them out. So yeah. Well, thank you. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, John. And tomorrow we'll get into the Nepal Waterkeeper here. He's a really interesting man doing wonderful work. So we'll do that, and we'll see how tomorrow's protest goes. It may blow the sockets in the whole city here. Already the buses kind of shut down. I had a hard time getting back. It was hard to get buses after the protest. So, and all kinds of streets were locked down. So it had a big footprint in town, and tomorrow's due to be even bigger. So we're going to try to monitor that, and we'll bring it to everybody who listens if we can. So thank you all, folks. Thanks for tuning in once again, and we'll try to keep reporting and get some of the word out of what's going on in COP to you in the coming days. Thank you very much. Thanks for tuning in, folks. See you soon.